Hi, I'm Yuli Alice Shen, Instructor of English at USI, and this is Overheard on Uber. I thought you didn't like Japanese people, but I bet you'd like her. Dirty Confessions of Rideshare Culture. I deal with filth and foulness every day at my job. I invite strangers into my personal space, and I take them places, both figurative and literal. Some of them are unwashed and unkempt. Some of them are rude and foul-mouthed. We talk sometimes. We avoid talking most of the time. But when our session is through, they pay me and pass judgment on me. I pass judgment on them too, then move on to the next. While this may sound like a particularly horrible day in the classroom, this is not how I would describe my career as an English instructor at the University of Southern Indiana. At the time of submitting this abstract to the Filth and Foulness Colloquium in January 2020, pre-pandemic, I was also moonlighting as an Uber driver. Yes, 3 years prior, in the summer of 2017, I decided to pick up this side hustle on a whim. Not a particularly lucrative investment with Evansville's relatively low demand, but I enjoy the act of driving, and it was an easy enough way of spending my summer vacation. I anticipated some harassment, of course, mostly microaggressions and unwanted flirtation due to my ethnicity, sex, age, appearance, what have you. However, what I hadn't anticipated was a complex social experiment that revealed not only the varied demographics and practical mores of people who regularly depend on the kindness of strangers, but also my unwitting and in some cases privileged tourism in their lives. When the pandemic hit in March 2020, I didn't so much as make the decision to stop driving due to COVID concerns. I didn't have to. I was lucky enough to still retain my day job as a college instructor, one that I could now perform remotely. As a non essential worker, I was pretty much isolated and sheltered in my Zoom cocoon, away from the realities of discomforting headlines reporting increased harassment, assault, and murder of Asian Americans, the monolithic scapegoat for Trump's China virus. Now, just weeks after the misguided crusade like murders of Asian American women in the service industry, my paper takes on an even more dire undertone. I can no longer treat this topic as a meditative academic exercise. As a playwright, my creative aesthetic has often gravitated towards the little immoralities we commit in our everyday lives. As a scholar, my dramaturgical research delves into intimacy and consent in scripted theater and film. That summer marked the beginning of my autoethnographic research into the study of ride sharing as performative identity, paralleling the tactics, struggles, and breakthroughs that actors, professors, and performance scholars harness on stage, in the classroom, and in liminal spaces. This colloquium presentation started out as a sometimes funny, sometimes cringy reflection on the intersectional discrimination and profiling I myself have both faced and perpetrated as an Uber driver. But now it's become a more concrete exploration of customer service power dynamics in the COVID era gig economy, uncovering the dirty race and gender based open secrets of our increasingly life share culture. Everyone loves the schadenfreude of an Uber horror story. I've had my fair share of people with quirky personalities and hygiene issues. The weirdest trips I've taken are the ones that make me feel like I've aided and abetted in a drug deal. One time, I drove someone from their house in the seedy part of town to another house in a seedier part of town, then to the Econo Lodge on State Route 41, the only motel in town that opens its doors to registered sex offenders. I waited in the car for 10 minutes. The rider came back out. I drove them back home, but not before making a phone call for them from my own cell because they forgot their phone, and it was actually their friend who had requested the Uber from a different account. The quirkiness of driving Uber is, of course, unwelcomely punctuated by a dark potential for danger. When I first started driving in 2017, Uber and Lyft were still new to Evansville. The novelty of jumping into cars with strangers was exacerbated by the fact that I was not only a female driver, but a young looking Asian one at that, with all the bad driver stereotypes that come with those intersections. It also didn't help that at the time, my hair was dyed bright mermaid red for an acting role. I got looks of the leery kind and the leering kind. An oily older man once ogled me up and down and said, "You're too cute to be driving strange men around, and I wouldn't want this job for you. It's too dangerous." I wanted to clap back and tell him to stop looking at me. that he was proving his own point, but I lacked the gumption. I did take safety precautions, though. Instead of carrying a purse large enough to hold my gigantic feminine style wallet, I purchased a bifold men's wallet and carried it in my jacket or pants pocket in case I needed a quick getaway. My friend gave me a pink personal taser that I still am not entirely sure I'd be confident enough to use. I took the advice of an article targeted towards female Uber drivers, suggesting that instead of rolling down my window and asking, "Are you so and so?" to a potential passenger standing at the curb, I should ask, "Who are you waiting for?" to confirm that they know who their driver should be. These gendered behavioral adjustments weren't troublesome necessarily, but they did make me notice more and more the power dynamics between rider and driver, customer and service provider. The first seemingly innocuous but ultimately prejudicial behavior I observed about myself was my unwitting profiling of passengers' music tastes. In an effort to gain tips and cool points, I would try to determine what music a passenger might like to listen to, just from their picture and name, back when passengers also had to provide pictures. Uber has since changed that policy to deter drivers from refusing riders based on ethnicity. If it were an older male passenger, I might put on classic rock. If it were an older female passenger, I might put on show tunes or adult contemporary. If it were a younger male, I'd put on alternative. A younger female, pop. My predictions weren't entirely accurate, as most any kind of profiling can attest, and I made the mistake one time of assuming an older female passenger would enjoy Christmas music. She did not. Usually, though, riders would make no comment. But this profiling was short lived, for I began realizing how discriminatory my well meaning assumptions were. In trying to repent, I then fell into the trap of overcorrecting by not changing the station at all, even if what was playing might be insensitive. One time, I was already listening to Sirius XM's Pandora Now, which plays today's pop and hip hop, including many songs with explicit pejorative language and a surprising number of songs by alleged abuser Chris Brown. A black passenger got into my car, and I wondered whether I should change the station, thinking they'd be offended by the music's liberal use of the N word or my seeming enjoyment of music by an artist with an unsavory personal life. Or would it be more offensive to change the station because black people have reclaimed the N word? But then, do I, as an Asian American woman with only a passing affinity for rap music, have a right to enjoy its reclamation? The passenger said nothing. Another time, a white man and his teenage son got in the car, and the song happened to be Leighton Green's Leave 'Em Alone. I thought about changing the station to avoid exposing the teen to explicit misogynistic language. But then I wondered if the father would think I was trying to parent his child, and in doing so, also further stigmatizing the N word and its reclamation in the black music industry. Did the son snicker at the offensive lyrics that compare a woman's genitalia to ice cream? Did the father's thank you seem particularly curt as he exited the car? Should I be apologetic for how I've assumed and knowingly reduced all these passengers to their predominant race and age traits? Or am I, as an academic, artist, and thus neurotic, just overthinking it all? Several passengers have noted how educated I sound, maybe because after they ask me how long I've been driving, I say intermittently for 2 years. Ever since someone made a crack about me using big words, I started saying off and on instead. They're impressed or act impressed when I tell them my daylight as a college English professor. They must also wonder why I need this side hustle. Aren't college professors generally pretty affluent? Make no mistake, while I do feel more privileged than the average demographic of Uber driver or rider, I am a non tenured contract faculty member at USI. I make just enough for a single person with no spouse or dependents and admittedly no pre existing medical conditions or elderly parents yet. I don't need the money per se. Driving Uber during summer and winter breaks gives me some extra padding. It's not my main source of income, nor is owning a 2016 5-seat SUV the only way I can contribute to society. Should I feel ashamed for slumming it, taking a menial driving job away from someone who might need it? Should I feel ashamed for making an academic research project out of other people's lived realities? Am I a mere tourist in intersections outside of my own? Driving Uber has shown me how the other half lives. I've driven through less manicured parts of Evansville that I didn't even know existed. The small and cramped Walmart neighborhood markets, the plethora of Dollar Trees, Dollar Generals, Family Dollars, laundromats. Gas stations with bars on the windows, bars that don't have 10 hipster craft beers on tap. It's nigh unfathomable to me that some people pay strangers to drive them 2 miles away just so they can do their laundry, or that they buy necessities like frozen groceries or small jugs of laundry detergent for $1 a piece at places I treat as novelties where I can get cheap party supplies or gift bags in bulk. I picked up a rider once from Victoria National Golf Club in Newburgh who was well dressed, well spoken, and ostensibly well fed. He had a takeout box in his hands, and it was only after he departed that I noticed he had forgotten it in the car. Inside was an 8-ounce medium rare steak, just the steak, no sides. He had already cut into it, so it must have been a larger steak when he ordered it. Is that his MO? To gift leftovers to homeless people on the street or people who provide him a service? Should I have reported an item left in my car, or did he intentionally do it? I waited 2 days for a follow up, and none arrived, so I ate the steak. Did I feel guilty eating it because I'm not a homeless person on the street? Was he hoping to do a good deed for someone less privileged than him, and thus did I qualify? Over the holidays, one time, I picked up a young man who was visiting family back home. He had recently graduated from USI, and he now ran his own marketing firm in Washington, D.C., incidentally, near Northern Virginia, the bougie part where I grew up. I noted the coincidence of our parallel locations, then immediately felt the wave of embarrassment and self loathing that transplants to the Midwest who've lived here for over a decade often feel. What was I doing with my life? I have a bachelor's in English literature and a master's of fine arts in playwriting, and I longed to be where this bright eyed, bushy tailed entrepreneur was, a big theater city where I could pursue dramatic craft for real instead of sinking ever deeper into the meager but steady income and benefits provided by the trenches of academia. There's nothing like chauffeuring a former student, no matter if he was mine or not, to put my failings in perspective. I tell my English composition students that teaching is a performance. My in class persona is a manifestation of my real self, of course, but so is whatever scripted character I'm currently acting as in a play. When I put on a Disney's Mulan costume for a 4-year old's birthday party, I am Mulan the character, but in a way, I'm also the legendary figure, an envoy to the spare Asian American culture we have in Southern Indiana. Whatever identity I perform as an Uber driver is me, but also not me. I feel the need to code switch, or rather, learn how to code switch more convincingly. Slur my words, deepen my voice, not laugh so boisterously. Whether to gain riders' approval, convince them that I'm not exactly what I am, a privileged little Chinese girl who thought this job would be fun, or to establish dominance, convince them that I'm a badass tigress who might actually know kung fu, or to simply hide the hamster wheel of neurotic worst case scenarios racing through my head, convince them of my devil may care insouciance. Is this what Asian American women have to do to protect themselves from sexualization, fetishization, assassination? The recent murders in Atlanta, Georgia, of Asian American spa workers by a white man claiming to expunge sexual temptation is just another unsurprising hate crime born of ethnocentrism and stereotyping of Asian women as both docile yet sexual, virgins yet whores deserving of indictment. Coming on the heels of malicious attacks against Asian American elders, Asian American gas station attendants, and yes, Asian American rideshare drivers whose passengers have refused to mask up in alleged retaliation for the Kung flu. These racially and ethnically targeted assaults show how the Asians as model minority myth is as damaging as ever. We praise those successful white collar Asian immigrants who fit the stereotype of the quiet, capable straight A student. Sculpted by corporal punishment and all night study sessions, goaded by disapproving, never satisfied tiger parents, driven to suicide ideation by insurmountable academic pressure. Yet, we devalue and endanger those thicker accented, blue and pink collar Asian immigrants who fit another stereotype, that of the menial worker who provides services anywhere from delivering takeout to cleaning houses to providing carnal pleasure. Intraracial prejudice and colorism are also disappointingly prevalent among older generation Asians who came to the US expecting their children to succeed in white collar professions, who remember the 20th century wars and political turmoil of their respective home countries that pit complexion against complexion, I shape against I shape. Driving is associated with responsibility, with movement, with progress. In the 2.5 years I actively drove for Uber, app interactions had improved overall. A function was created to share driver location with emergency contacts, and accidents or incidents now have specific reporting forms. And of course, in December 2019, Uber released their first ever comprehensive review detailing murders, rapes, sexual assaults, and other crimes committed by both drivers and riders. A transparent move that safety advocates hailed as a great step forward in accountability. Automobiles are also symbols of ingenuity, a uniquely American ingenuity. What we drive, from make to model, from color to infinite other customizable options, reveals our likes, dislikes, powers, privileges. The way we drive, from how fast to how territorially, is as ingrained into our identities as our politics, our passions, our creeds, our prejudices. I'm fortunate that no rider has ever raised their voice to me, or touched me, or assaulted me, and that the microaggressions I've experienced born of racism, sexism, and ageism are relatively seldom. I do, however, remember vividly a passenger's friend calling out from the curb, "I thought you didn't like Japanese people, but I bet you'd like her." The passenger seemed slightly embarrassed, but capitulated with, I tolerate him. I felt proud of myself that I summoned up the wherewithal to actually call out the window, "Don't talk about me like that." Something I would never have had the gumption to do years ago. The passenger did apologize for their friend during the ride. 2020 and the coronavirus has forced us apart, literally with social distancing, as well as figuratively by showing us the disparate systemic gaps in race, ability, wealth, and health. It may be maudlin to say 2020 has also brought us closer together, showcasing the magnitude of international support for vaccine research and social justice reform that hopefully transcends TikTok attention spans and hashtag activism. But the silver lining of global interconnectivity must be noted. Beyond just ride sharing, we have apps that let us book a room in someone's house, have someone else do our grocery shopping for us, even have someone else perform tasks and errands for us, like assembling unwieldy furniture or picking up dry cleaning. There's even an app called Be My Eyes, which pairs people who are blind or have low vision with sighted volunteers all over the world. If a visually impaired person needs help differentiating colors of clothing or spices in a cabinet, they can call the app, and a sighted person from anywhere around the globe may pick up and help by looking through the caller's phone camera, being their eyes. It's like Uber, but with seeing, sight sharing, if you will. We are increasingly sharing our lives more, yet also airing so much more of our laundry, the hot takes, the self promotion, the filth, and the foul. When we outsource the essential functions of our lives, we are trusting and relying on the kindness of strangers, and attention must be paid to not dehumanize those strangers or remain silent in the face of their sacrifice and suffering. To do more would be growth. To do more would be responsibility, movement, progress, to drive, to perform, to share, to see. Thank you very much.